Hello and welcome to another episode of Eat, Smoke, Drink. Today I am going to review the newly released, well actually here in New Zealand we're about 3 or 4 months behind the rest of the world in the UK. Well, UK, but today I'm going to review the Springbank 15 Rum Wood. Springbank 15 Rum Wood. So it's, Springbank has their standard 10, 12, 15, 18, 21 and occasionally 25 core range, and then they had the limited editions where they put it in, well, kind of, I think it's a bit experimental perhaps, but they had the limited editions where they experiment with different barrels, and this one is the Rum Wood. First impressions, quite a golden honey-like hue, and if you don't know, if this is your first time visiting this channel, Springbank is quite an old-fashioned distillery, and please check out my other Springbank reviews. But Springbank is an old-fashioned distillery. They're quite a small batch distillery. Each run is roughly, for the standard line, is about 8 to 10,000 bottles, and as they get older they tend to have less bottles as well. Obviously there's less bottlings, less available to bottle as the barrel gets older. They also still store their barrels under the dunnage warehousing, which is basically stone, wood, relatively exposed, open to the atmosphere type of warehouses, earthen or clay or stone floors, and what you get is you get this fusty, fungally, wet wood, damp note that you get with your standard Springbanks. But let's try this one to see how it goes. Straight away I am getting quite a clean smell from this. So not your typical Springbank at all. But it's not supposed to be a typical Springbank because it is a Rum Wood, it is an experimental series. Or a limited edition series, let's say. I'm getting straight away some honey, roasted pineapples. I'm getting a little bit of smoke in the back end. I wouldn't say peat, but smoke. Overripe fruit. It always seems to happen when I crack open a Springbank, the bird starts chirping, so you can hear them. I'm getting a slight minerally metallic smell, just a very, very slight smell of that. I'm getting a like a talcum powder dryness to it, and a floral note as well. A little bit of jasmine flower. Look, the more you nose it, the more it starts to reveal itself. I'm starting to get a little bit of dampness coming through. They were talking about from the dunnage warehousing, the fusty. Not too prominent though, not too prominent. That fustiness is from the environment and the barrel itself. And sherry makes it a little bit more pronounced, but this one is a Rum Wood, and it is a relatively clean and clinical smelling Springbank. I'm getting a sugar syrup, like a white sugar syrup, and sweetness overall. Let's try the one with water. It's 51%. You know, I wouldn't recommend watering down 51% Springbanks, but you never really know, so it's always good to have a little bit of water and try it out, but I'll see how we go. Okay, so with a little bit of water, it opens itself up a little bit more herbal and medicinal. Licorice, menthol, definitely menthol, ginger, a bit of spice to it. I'm thinking maybe a mix of black and white pepper, more white pepper than black pepper. A grassy note to it, pine resin, grass. Fantastic smelling whiskey, but it is very clean. So when I tried this before, I felt a little bit disappointed, even though I shouldn't really be, but I felt a little bit disappointed because it is a little bit clean smelling for a Springbank. It doesn't have that filthiness that I like. let's get tasting. It's got a little bit of heat on it. The grassy notes comes through, a little bit of pine, licorice definitely comes through, a menthol heat, a menthol warmth, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of a hint of honey, and I'm getting a slight bitterness as well. Like it's interesting. I'm getting a slight bitterness. I'm not quite sure what it's from. Almost like a grapefruit pith. Yeah, but very clean. It's not very dirty like the normal Springbank, and so that portion of it is a little disappointing. But it is a very drinkable whiskey. Actually, as an introduction to Springbank, I would say it's actually pretty good because it doesn't have that weird filthiness that some people might find polarizing if they're not used to Springbank. It's a very old-fashioned whiskey, floor malting, so it does sometimes polarize people, but it is quite a clean whiskey. It's got a slight bitterness, slight metallicness to it. The roasted pineapple is there, but also roasted stone fruit. Overall, a very interesting whiskey. A very interesting whiskey because it is not your typical Springbank. On the back end, I'm getting a slight smoke. On the back of the throat, I'm getting slight earthiness, but nothing overpowering, nothing that jumps out at you. The flavor is quite mellow. It is quite a mellow flavor. Let's try the one with water. As you can see, just when you're wondering what I'm doing, a lot of people just sip and drink, but it's actually best to keep it in your mouth and just swirl it around, let it coat your mouth. Your saliva will water it down a little bit as well, and it really fully reacts with your mouth, and you get more flavors. So that's what I'm doing. So with water, sweetness comes through a lot more. The herbal properties come through a lot more, and it's interesting enough, the menthol heat comes through quite a bit more as well. I would actually say right now, from that 2 sips that I've had, water. With water, the flavors are more pronounced. With water, the sweetness comes through a lot more, the roasted pineapple comes through a lot more, all the flavors come through a lot more, even a little bit more tannin comes through a lot more, and it becomes less clean with water, which is quite ironic because usually you'd assume water will water it down. But what it's done is that water has tamed the alcohol a little bit, and it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes taming the alcohol too much, you lose complexity. But in this case, the water actually increases the complexity, and it helps bind the flavors and make it more amplified. So it's fantastic. I quite like it. I mean, yeah, the fruits definitely come through more. Stone fruits. I'm getting a bit of nectarine. The grassy and pine notes come through a lot more. I'm liking it a lot more with water, but it's still a very clean whiskey. A very clean whiskey. Overall, would I get this again? Look, that's an interesting one because this is a limited edition. Once they've released it, it's gone. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would. If you're a Springbank fan, of course I would recommend it. Have it with the rest of your Springbank and have a bit of a progression with it. It's not the typical Springbank you'd expect, and that's why I think it's worth buying and it's worth keeping and letting it breathe. When I first opened this about 2 weeks ago, and I just let in a bit of air in, it was a lot different to what it is now. So I would say get it, let it progress with other Springbanks, bring it in at the first of your other Springbanks, and then kind of go through that experience. Cigar pairings, this is quite a clean whiskey, quite a mellow whiskey. Yes, there are some pronounced flavors when you put water in it, but it's quite a mellow whiskey. I would say get something oily and robust and dirty with this whiskey and just get that to balance each other. Something like the Liga Provida, number 9s, T52s, Flying Pig, Undercrown, that kind of spirit, or Arturo Fuente Añejo. I think that is also a good one to have. Something oily, something dark, something a mouthful, and then I reckon it'll complement each other, and you'll start to get some of that dirtiness as well as some of that sweetness balancing each other out. Thank you very much for joining me today, and until next time, make sure you eat, smoke, drink. Ciao.